Good evening, everybody. We're going to start out with introductions now. And our first person is going to be Ms. Vicki Pattillo.
Well, after that rendition of the Star Spangled Banner, I was afraid on my heart. That was too hard of an act to follow, but I'll do my best. As they said, I'm Vicki Pattillo, your district attorney. And 4 years ago, I promised that I would fight to protect victims in our community, and I have done that. Every year that I have been district attorney, I have obtained a grant to help with victims of sexual assault, child abuse, elderly abuse, and victims of family violence. In these cases alone, I have obtained convictions which have earned the criminals over 1,000 years behind bars. My office employs 2 victim witness coordinators to help victims with filling out victims' compensation forms, obtaining counseling, and other victim services, including going to court and just sitting with them, waiting for their cases to be heard in the courtroom. I promised to put victims first, and I have kept that promise. 4 years ago, I promised to help wage war on drugs in our communities. My office has assisted in securing long prison sentences for drug dealers and manufacturers, and we are continuing to file and vigorously prosecute hundreds of drug-related cases. We have assisted law enforcement in all 3 counties with undercover drug operations. This is another promise made and another promise kept. 4 years ago, I promised to use my over 23 years experience with the law to help fight crime in our communities and to help protect our victims. And I have kept that promise. Promises made and promises kept. I am asking for your vote so that I can continue to keep the promises that I have made and to continue to work to help keep our community safer.
Ms. Heather Hollub. Is it Hollub or Hollub?
It's Hollub. There's 2 of them.
Make sure.
Apparently, when the family moved from Lavaca County to Guadalupe, they dropped one of the L's, so it is now double. Well, they added an L, so it's now double L. I have to apologize. I'm not used to standing up on stage. I'm used to being in a courtroom. My name is Heather Hollub, and my husband and I live in Guadalupe County. We're raising 2 children. I am a former prosecutor for the Guadalupe County Attorney's Office, and I am currently a defense attorney who's got to practice across the 3 counties, 4 counties, including Comal, Bear, and other areas. As a prosecutor, I vigorously presented cases before juries. In my career, I've actually earned a very good reputation for presenting cases to the juries and getting punishments that fit the crime. I'm running for district attorney because I believe that we need change. We need a district attorney's office that is willing to not only get indictments, but to follow through and get punishments that fit the crime. There have been far too many cases dismissed. There's been far too many persons placed on deferred adjudication probation. We need a district attorney who is willing to vigorously fight for each of our victims, whether the victim is the state or whether the victim is the person. We need a district attorney who's going to be dedicated to the office, be dedicated to the community, and be dedicated to the victims of each case and follow through. We've had far too many light sentences and far too many cases that have been dismissed. I'm proud to announce to you tonight that my campaign has been endorsed by the Singing Police Officers Association. Further, I'm proud to announce that we found out today that I have been endorsed by the Texas Municipal Police Officers Association. There were members in all 3 counties, Guadalupe, Gonzales, and Lavaca County. It's my understanding from the director it was unanimous that my campaign has been endorsed. That means volumes. It speaks volumes. Law enforcement is part of the team. The prosecutor is part of the team. We need a district attorney who will aggressively work with training, with trying cases, with presenting good cases to the judiciary so that we can get sentences that fit the crime. I'm asking for your support and your vote in this election. Thank you.
Okay, we'll start the questioning now. What we're going to do is we're going to rotate on who goes first with the questions. And since Vicki went first to the opening, Heather will go first with the first question. I'll read the question the first time, and if you're second and you want me to repeat the question, I will. Just ask me to. The first question, if you are elected, what is your stance on trying sexual assault offenses on both children and adults, as opposed to reducing the offenses in plea bargains and not going to court at all?
I believe that those type of cases should be the priority of the district attorney's office. Oftentimes, in those particular cases, the victims are scared. The victims often don't want to testify. However, we have wonderful agencies. Here in Guadalupe, Gonzales County, you've got Norma's House. In Guadalupe County, we've got the Children's Advocacy Center. We've got the Battered Women's Shelter, family violence shelters that can help these victims testify. There's counseling and there's all sorts of resources available to help these victims present cases, to testify. I think it's important that we give them their day in court. Unfortunately, when we reduce cases to non-sexual offenses, we have people that are pleading guilty to offenses, sometimes having to be placed on the registered sex offender list, but they're not getting convictions for sex offenses. I think it's ridiculous, and I'd rather have the victim face the offender in the courtroom with the resources that we have available in the community than for them to get a light sentence and have to see the offender in Walmart or to see the offender when they're coming home from school. I think these type of cases need to be made a priority, but not just the cases against children, also the cases against women. I think that we need to dedicate a lot of our resources to addressing those particular cases. It's unbelievable the number of sex offenders who've been placed on deferred adjudication and the number of sexual offenses that have just been plain dismissed. Victims deserve their day in court. Victims deserve justice.
Okay. Vicki's next. You need the question again? Would you like?
I understand.
Okay.
I think it's important to analyze each case as it comes in the office. My opponent has never tried a sex case. They are absolutely the hardest cases to try, and they're the hardest cases to win. We have tried successfully several sex cases. Guadalupe County last spring, we got 99 years on an offender. But the problem with some of these cases is that they can go either way. And we have to analyze each case individually as it comes in and do what's appropriate. My office uses what's called cap pleas, where we agree that we'll do a cap of 20 years on a sex case. The judge can do anything from probation to 20 years. It spares the victim from having to testify. If you've ever, like I have, had to sit with a victim and counsel a victim, especially a little child who's going to have to go in a courtroom and not only face their perpetrator and their abuser, but they also have to tell a room full of strangers the most intimate details of horrendous acts that have been committed upon them. My office tried, since I've been DA, there was a sex case here tried. The perpetrator got 30 years. When we need to, we try them. And they've always been a priority with my office, but I can't. Each individual case is different, and sometimes we have to do what we have to do just to get the perpetrator in the system.
Okay, thank you. That was our first question. And the next question, we're going to start with Vicki. She'll be the first one on this one. And this one is illegal immigration is always a hot topic, especially in Texas. If an arrest is made, what will you do to verify that an individual is not an illegal immigrant? And if that individual is an illegal immigrant, what will be done?
First of all, their citizenship verification is usually done by the arresting agency. We've indicted many illegal immigrants, and we've sent them some to prison. Sometimes they try under a treaty to get back to Mexico to get tried there. But we prosecute illegal immigrants the same as we prosecute any other offender.
Okay, Heather.
As your district attorney, I would make sure that we alert the federal agencies when we have these type of cases so that holds can be placed on them. Unfortunately, if the holds are not placed on them and they make bond, many of them do flee back to other areas, not just Mexico, but they leave the county, they leave the jurisdiction. I think it's important to work along with the federal government to make sure that holds get placed on these particular individuals and that they also receive sentences that fit the crime.
Okay, next question. This will be first going to Heather. What steps will you take to eliminate the drug problem in our coverage area?
We do have a tremendous drug problem. Those of you that live out in the rural areas, and I know Gonzales has a lot of issues with drug dealers. Some of the issues that we need to aggressively pursue is training with the law enforcement. We also need to look at some of this money from the asset forfeitures to buy better equipment and to work together with law enforcement to make the best cases possible. To work with informants to make sure that we have good contracts. And when asked by law enforcement, we will give their request, each and every request, the input that they need and listen to each case. And because they're the ones that have to make it. Law enforcement officers are the ones that are out on the street. They're the ones having to get these drug dealers off the street. They're the ones who are going into the houses with meth labs. You know, law enforcement needs to be given a lot of discretion in some of their contracts that they're using with undercover agents. We also need to work closely to add rehab programs, rehabilitation at drug courts. Guadalupe County is growing, and Guadalupe County is almost to the minimum guideline for having to have a drug court. Those type of programs that are working in other areas need to also be used in smaller areas like Gonzales County and Lavaca County to help with rehabilitation. But drug offenders need to be taken off of the street, those who are selling drugs to our children, to our neighbors, and those who are making drugs, threatening not only our safety, but the safety of law enforcement officers that have to go into those homes and break up the drug rings. I think we need to aggressively pursue drug cases and look at the different sentencing options depending on if we're dealing with a dealer or a user.
Okay, Vicki.
Well, I think I would continue doing what we've started doing now. We, in all the counties, have worked on undercover operations that sometimes take months, where there's an undercover officer who buys from drug dealers, and these cases go on months, and the drug dealers don't know who they're selling to. We just had a big sting operation here in Gonzales County with the Sheriff's Department, and we indicted over 20 dealers. And it's just important to keep going because we've done this before, where we have indicted and sent dealers to prison, and it only takes 3 to 6 months for their shoes to be filled, and more their cousins or their nephews are back dealing again. And it's a constant vigilance, and we work constantly with law enforcement in all 3 counties to try to curtail that. I also think that rehabilitation is very important. The legislature is pushing for rehabilitation. Their funding is going there more, and they've also made mandatory laws where certain drug offenders have to get probation. It's very important to get them off the drugs because they're also responsible for the forgeries and burglaries and other crimes, credit card abuse. So the rehabilitation is a very crucial issue.
Okay, and this will be the first round will be for Vicki. And Vicki, if you are elected, how would your office, your DA's office, change? Would it change at all?
I think we're constantly changing. We're always trying to improve. I'm trying a new system now with the way the cases are being rotated. I think it's very important to see what's working and what's not. I've been DA for 3 years, and I have had a turnover in staff that happened recently, and I've got excellent people that are in their place. And I feel that we've got a team again working, a very good team. And I feel that we have to see what's working and what's not and keep going. But I'm always open to change and always open to trying to make it better.
Okay, Heather.
Well, I think there's been too much change in the district attorney's office. It seems like there's always new prosecutors. I think that becomes frustrating for law enforcement. As recent as February 11th of 2008, new policies were faxed out on how cases were to be submitted to the district attorney's office. I think that makes it hard for law enforcement to have consistency there. There's also cases where we've had officers take their cases in, and there's an attorney there, they explain the case to them, they come back and it's a new attorney. Or we've changed who's responsible for which law enforcement agency. I think one of the major issues needs to be some consistency. We need to set up policies and procedures and keep them in place. We also need to work hard at training and keeping good attorneys. Unfortunately, there's been 3 out of the 4 attorneys that have left the district attorney's office in the last 6 months. That's valuable experience that goes out the door. So, and as my district attorney's office, we will work aggressively to keep our prosecutors, to keep the staff, and to develop systems with law enforcement that stay the same, so that law enforcement will have the reliability and the continuity of having something constant instead of constantly changing policies.
Okay, thank you. And this question will go to Heather. A rather broad question, but it'll give you a little bit a chance to expound on things. Why are you the best candidate for this position?
I'm the best candidate for this position because I'm an aggressive trial lawyer. I started my practice as a prosecutor, and when I went into defense work, I continued the practice of taking my cases to trial. I've actually averaged a trial every other month since I've been in practice, sometimes 2 trials in 1 week. I've got an 80% victory rate in my trials. I'm very good at evaluating cases, but more importantly, I understand that the district attorney is merely a member of a team, the team that is required to work together to present the best cases to the grand jury and to present the best cases to the judiciary and to the juries of our counties. We have got to work with law enforcement. We have got to work together with training. We've got to work together with case presentation. I believe that my leadership abilities, I'm the former director of a nonprofit agency. I have training in managing and supervising personnel, and having owned Hollub and Associates, I've got experience with managing and supervising attorneys. But I believe that my attitude and my belief that the law enforcement officers and the district attorney's office need to work together as a team to make me an asset to the community and with each community in this district. And I believe that my aggressive nature and my ability to try cases would also be an asset, and I'm asking for the opportunity to be able to do that in all 3 counties.
Okay, Vicki?
I believe my 27 years of legal experience, 27 years working in these communities and going to court are invaluable. My opponent has been out in private practice for 3 years. She's only done felonies for 3 years. She says she is a avid trial lawyer. She tries misdemeanor cases as a defense attorney. Those cases are so much different than preparing and trying a felony. A felony prosecutor, any prosecutor, has to carry the burden of proof. They have to put on a case, and they have to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt to a jury. A defense attorney can take an officer that she talks about so hard working with and pick apart their testimony enough to get a jury to find reasonable doubt, and then the jury will find somebody not guilty. It's a whole different world being in a felony prosecuting situation. Our trials last almost a week. The preparation is extensive. A misdemeanor DWI trial lasts a day, day and a half at the most. It's completely different. And I think that my opponent is making promises that she cannot possibly keep. She's making them to law enforcement, and it sounds really good to them. But I'm telling you that I will not make a promise I cannot keep. I will do the best that I can do, and I have done the best that I can do, but I'm not a politician. And I am not going to tell people what they want to hear just to win an election.
Okay, the next question. Vicki will be the first one that this question is, and it sort of goes along the same lines as this previous question. Please describe your relevant experience through employment or other involvements which has contributed to or demonstrated your ability to manage people, budgets, other resources, especially with respect to an office like the district attorney's.
Well, I was in private practice for 27 years and managed a very successful law practice. Before that, before I went to law school, I was a public school teacher and I worked with children. While I was a lawyer in private practice, I was on the school board in Nixon-Smiley. I was president of the school board. And during that time, we worked with budgets and worked hard with managing the schools. Since I've been district attorney, I have done a conservative budget every year. I stick to that budget. My operating budget, I've never had to go back to Commissioner's Court and ask for more money. I keep the expenses down. I worry about the taxpayers and the expenses all the time, and I'm constantly doing things to keep the expenses down. I manage 11 employees full-time. It's not as easy as it sounds to have employees and to keep things going. She has talked about peak turnover. I've been GA 3 years, and the turnover that I had was just this last fall. And It happens. My opponent has had 4 or 5 attorneys leave in 3 years who work for her. She says she will strive to keep attorneys. It's not easy because attorneys use prosecuting offices to start out and then move on to other jobs. I think my experience with life and maturity is very important.
Okay, Heather, same question.
I think that we need to look at what's required in the district attorney's office, because not only do they have to manage personnel, they also have to manage the docket and the cases and time management. Throughout my career, I've had the opportunity to juggle both my private practice and our family business. I am a shareholder in Hollub Properties and Kelco Investment Properties. We manage the budgets with those 2 shareholdings. I've also had experience creating budgets and operating budgets in my private practice. But prior to going to law school, I was the director of the Activity Center, a nonprofit youth center. Through that, I've experienced both in writing grants and managing a small budget. And to address the issue of attorneys, since I have been in private practice, I have supervised attorneys. Ms. Pattillo has just stated that I have attorneys leave my office. I actually have attorneys that are currently working as contractors for my office that have been in my office and are supporting my campaign. 3 out of the 4 attorneys that have left Ms. Pattillo's office in the last few months are actively supporting my campaign. It can be seen on my website, hollubforda.com. I think my experience both in supervision and as a prosecutor, my experience in the Guadalupe County Attorney's Office, it was mistakenly stated that I only tried misdemeanor cases. We also handled felony juvenile cases. And since I've been in private practice, I've also been trying felony cases in all different courts across the counties. I think that my experience, although I've only been in private practice and as an attorney for 6 years in May, I think it's important to look at what we've been doing during that time. Ms. Pattillo has stated on the radio that I have had more jury trials than she has in 27 years. So I have had a very active practice and will prepare me very well for the district attorney's office.
Okay. Our next question, and this one will go first to Heather. What is your position on victim advocacy for domestic violence and drug offenses?
I think victim advocacy is important. I'm on the board of directors for the Guadalupe Family Violence Shelter. I've also been an active volunteer with the Family Violence Shelter. I received the 2007 Attorney of the Year from South Texas Rural Legal Aid for being a victim's advocate. I've received awards also from other agencies for being a victim's advocate. I think it's important to support the victims. It's hard when you are working with victims of assault, family violence, or sexual abuse because most of the time the persons that commit the offenses are actually family members. I think victims advocacy is important. In 1999, the 25th Judicial District first got a grant from the Attorney General's office. That grant has been renewed. I think that grant is very important. We need to continue to aggressively pursue areas, not only through the Attorney General's office and the Justice Fund, but we need to look at expanding the victim services provided. And I do think that it's important that we look at other federal grants that are available for community policing and for community supported victims. And in drug cases, I think we need to look at rehabilitation and look at the entire family and the entire system in which we are handling those cases.
Okay. Vicki, same question.
Well, in the 24 years that I was in private practice, I volunteered at the shelter as well. What I did was, I did it at very reduced rates. When I first started practicing law, the county attorney in Guadalupe County didn't do protective orders for women who were victims of family violence. I was one of the very few attorneys in the whole county that did those at a very, very nominal fee, and I got awards, and I worked hard, and I did them for years until the county attorney picked them up. Also, I worked on child protected cases. I did those at a very reduced rate for 24 years as well. When I could have gotten off the court appointment list and not done them, I never did. I've had hundreds of those cases over the years representing children who've been removed from their home because of physical abuse or sexual abuse. Victims have always been the most important thing for me. I have not just gotten renewed grants. In fact, grants have dried up and they're very hard to get. And this year we got a grant from the Office of the Attorney General, which is completely different. And we did that based on our statistics and the work that we do with the victims. As far as victims of drug cases, I feel victims of drug cases are people out in the community who are stolen from, the shoplifters. We work very hard with that. In fact, a lot of times if if a person, I have to stop, sorry.
Okay, now the next question, and this one will go to Vicki first. Working closely with law enforcement is a key part of being the district attorney. Please describe your relationship with law enforcement throughout the three-county area and tell the people how important you believe it is to listen to what they have to say before taking a case to the grand jury.
Well, I work well with law enforcement. We don't always agree. A lot of times they come in with a case and they see it one way and I see it another way and I respect everything they do. They work so hard to solve a crime, and then they have to come in and we have to say, but we need another witness statement. We need this, we need that before we can take it to the grand jury and take it to court. I do listen to law enforcement. I do put on training, contrary to how it sounds. I do at least 2 trainings a year for law enforcement. My office is open to them. My office is on call 24 hours a day for law enforcement. They call my investigator first, and if he feels it's necessary, he calls me or another attorney in the office. I feel a free exchange between law enforcement and my office, and we do. Sometimes it's real free. We argue and we don't agree. And I think that's important, to be able to discuss our separate issues and discuss our differences.
Okay, same question for Heather.
I think it's very important to work with law enforcement. The district attorney and law enforcement aren't always going to be best friends, and there are always going to be 2 sides to each story. However, when you look at the number of cases that have been dismissed in the last 3 years, it shows that there's some type of problem. There's something going on that these officers' cases get taken through grand jury, they get indicted, and then they later get dismissed. The ball is getting dropped somewhere. I think it's very, very important to work with law enforcement in training on a regular basis, to have on-call attorneys like many of the surrounding counties, such as Hayes and Comal, where an officer can call an attorney 24 hours a day, have search warrants emailed, have things reviewed. I think being on call and consistent training throughout the year, not just annually or biannually, will help with that relationship, help build better cases, and make the teamwork analogy work in our communities. And again, I'm very proud to have received the support and the endorsement of the Texas Municipal Police Officers Association.
Okay, the next question is, we will go to Heather first. Dealing with child abuse and neglect issues is always difficult. Tell us why you're the best person to deal with such issues, and how would you go about handling the cases?
I think you've got to work very closely with the Children's Advocacy Center, with Child Protective Services, with Norma's House, with these other resources available in the community, and with counselors, and with law enforcement officers. Those are the most difficult cases to work, starting from the beginning when officers get those calls. There's been some horrific crimes that have happened throughout this community, throughout all of our communities, that have just been devastating to the community as a whole. But too quickly, those cases that haunt our headlines get forgotten about. We've got to follow through on those cases and get punishments that fit the crime. We've had children that have been killed. We've had people that have been sitting in jail on those charges for over a year in Guadalupe County. And I know Gonzales County has also had some children that have been killed. We need to work very quickly to put these murders where they belong. We need to not let cases sit around for month after month after month. We need to make sure that we have trained officers to work these scenes, to gather the best evidence possible when they're there, but to also provide an attorney who they can call when they're on the scene, and it not take hours and hours for someone to respond. We need to work together on all of those cases and work with the counselors and work to get these victims' needs taken care of immediately. Resetting a case 5, 10, 12, 17 times is unacceptable. We've got to quickly move these cases while the evidence is best, and we've got to work as a team with law enforcement and with the advocacy centers, with the therapists, and with the doctors to successfully try these cases.
Okay, Vicki.
Well, first of all, these are the hardest cases, and they're the hardest cases to work and try. And in the case of child abuse, sometimes we have to work with the child for months to get them strong enough to be able to testify, and they work with the counselor. And as far as Reese says, I think you should talk to defense attorneys about that. They file motion after motion, and there's psychologicals and all kinds of things that have to be done. To get a case ready, a murder case ready for trial, takes months. And there's lots of pre-trial hearings and motions and here the judges make rulings, and we have to go from there. Also, in Gonzales County, for example, we don't have that many court dates to even have to do it. But as far as taking hours to respond, I don't know if that's a slur on my office or not, but my investigator is always ready and on the phone and there. He is at the scene, and I know he's at the scene to these cases because he calls me. I get calls all in the night, and I get more than one as far as what's going on and what's happening. These cases are a priority with my office. My investigators call first, and he makes the decision whether to call in the ranger and whether to call in the DPS labs, and that's what we do.
Okay, the next question, we'll go to Vicki first. Animal abuse has been in the local headlines lately here in Gonzales County. What is your position on animal abuse, and what steps, if any, would you take to ensure people who abuse animals are prosecuted?
Some animal abuse is a felony and some is not. There were new laws passed in September to make certain animal abuse now a felony. Any case that we get, we take them individually. We work them up, and we will take them to grand jury and prosecute if it's a felony and it meets all the elements of the crime. Animal abuse, to me, is a horrendous crime. And the stories that have come out in the press lately, it's just sickening. And we will prosecute them like we would any other crime.
Okay, Heather?
I think we need to look at all offenses, and specifically with animal abuse, they are victims that cannot defend themselves as humans can. They're much like children when we're dealing with our animals. We need to aggressively prosecute those who commit offenses against not only animals but children. I was a little disturbed in Guadalupe County. We had a case where some children had attacked viciously a dog and killed the dog, and that case was handled by the county attorney's office. But what I was concerned about are the over 7,000 people that signed a petition that wanted some type of punishment for that. And it was appalling when we look at the number of people that get upset about animal abuse, although it's very important that there are also other children that are being killed. There were not that many people that came out in support and asked for justice for those people that had killed babies in our community and had killed children. So although I think it's important that we prosecute those cases and follow it through, I think the priority of the office needs to be focused on all victims, and especially those victims that do not have any type of ability to defend themselves. And yes, animals do fall into that category, but we need to prioritize all cases that come into the office and look at all the facts.
Okay, our next question, we'll go to Heather first. As district attorney, making sure the public knows how your office is functioning is an important part of the job. Please describe your relationship with the news media and what can be done to make sure the public is informed about various cases through the news.
Well, the news media and the district attorney's offices or lawyers' offices or anyone, a lot of times sheriff's offices, police officers, a lot of what we read in the paper, it's not the whole story. And a lot of times we see these headlines and the haunting headlines that come, but we don't see what happens afterwards or how those cases are resolved. As district attorney, we will provide a website where we will list our cases, not the facts and information about the cases, but specifically the type of case, when it comes into the office, when it goes to grand jury, and how that is what that results in, whether it's indicted or not. And then we will follow through and provide documentation as to what the sentence was on that case. That's being done in Comal County. Very informative to the people. People can follow their cases and see what's going on, and the public can also go and follow up on how the cases get handled. Unfortunately now, we don't know what's going on with these cases. We know over 640-something cases have been dismissed. We know that people are getting deferred probation or lesser included sentences. We don't know what's going on. I think as a public servant that we owe the duty to the public to keep them informed of how cases are being handled, how many jury trials we're having, what the results of those jury trials are, how many cases we win, how many cases we lose. Especially working in an office with lots of other attorneys, I think it's imperative that the district attorney keep track of how cases are being resolved so that they will know how their office is running.
Okay, Vicki.
Well, I'm very open with the news media. When they call me, I give them the story of what's happening, what I can. Unfortunately, the district attorney's office is very limited on any kind of comments that they can make on a case, particularly an ongoing investigation or an ongoing case. Since I've been district attorney 3 years, through December 31st, we have filed 4,963 cases. And no, I don't have a website and state what's happened on all of those cases. I don't have time. We have a lot to do, and we're doing our job. And I'm not worried about self-promoting statistics. I'm worried about getting these cases done. And as far as the comments on dismissals, they are less than my predecessor had, and there's explanations for those dismissals. A lot of them are cases are dismissed and re-indicted on other offenses. Those cases, they may have 2 or 3 felonies, and we do case consolidation. The person can get pretrial diversion and successfully complete it, the case is dismissed. There are lots of reasons for the dismissal when they are not just dismissing cases that officers have made. And I feel it's very important. I have never hidden anything from the press. Anything that I'm asked, I tell them. I keep an open relationship with them, and I will do a press release when it's appropriate and only make comments that are appropriate about the case.
Okay, this is our last question, and then we'll have closing comments. This will go to Vicki first. Dateline NBC has made famous how to catch internet predators. As district attorney, would you pursue a similar program on the local level?
I think those cases are really hard to pursue that way, and they're very sensational, but I don't know how good the cases really turned out that way. To catch a sexual predator, we work with the Attorney General's office on online solicitations. They have a special squad that does that, and they come down and we work with them when we get any kind of idea about that, and they have computer forensic people. I think what we're doing there is a lot more invaluable than a sensational sting operation that they did. I would be curious to know how many of those cases they actually could make.
Okay, Heather?
Yes, I agree with Ms. Pattillo on that. When I worked at the Attorney General's office for now Senator John Cornyn, I had the opportunity to look at the Internet Division. They've got some computer whizzes up there. And what those guys can do is go through the computers and see what's going on, monitor. I would be more than happy to provide support at the local level and call in federal investigators and state investigators when necessary to investigate Internet crime. Unfortunately, a lot of those sting operations that were done on TV, a lot of those cases were ruined because the law enforcement work with the TVs and the media, a lot of them jeopardized the cases. But I think it's important to work with the resources that we do have, such as the Attorney General's office, in pursuing those crimes aggressively.
Okay, now we're going to have closing comments, and if I'm correct now, Vicki, you went first in the opening, so you'll go last here. Heather, you're first up on the closing comments.
I think it's important. It's important to look at the record of the District Attorney's Office. On January 15th of this year, we released our numbers. We went to the district clerks of each county. We looked at the Office of Court Administration. We took those numbers, we carefully studied the numbers, and we looked at the trends. And those trends showed that too many cases are being dismissed across the district, not just in Guadalupe, Gonzales, or Lavaca County, but in all 3 counties. We looked at surrounding counties. We looked at what was going on in Comal County, in Bexar County, in Hays County. We looked around to see what's going on in all the other counties, and we realized that too many cases in our counties, in our district, are being dismissed. Too many are not being tried. All these problems that come up, witnesses disappear, or we have this and we have that, that happens in all counties. But what we saw is that people in surrounding districts are receiving better justice than what we're receiving in the 25th Judicial District. As your district attorney, I will work to aggressively try cases. The judges give plenty of dockets, plenty of opportunities to take trials, to take the cases to jury trial. We have the opportunities, we have the time, and we have the resources. And when those cases do get taken to jury trials, when we do allow the people to tell us what kind of sentences people deserve that molest our children, that steal, we see that the juries of the county give far greater sentences than what are received. We will aggressively pursue cases. We will not rely on cap deals. Cap deals are very, very weak, and what they are, it's kind of like playing baseball, and I tell you, hey, if you hit a home run, it's not going to count, it's only going to be a double. It's passing the buck to the judges. It's not taking control of the docket, it's not taking control of the cases. As your district attorney, I will actively work to make sure that the sentences fit the crime. That persons who do not deserve deferred adjudication do not get deferred adjudication. For persons whose cases get indicted by the grand jury, that those cases go forward to jury trials and not just get dismissed.
Okay, thank you. Hold your call, please.
Well, my opponent just stated on January 15th she got statistics, but on January 17th and 18th she produced a brochure that's got completely different statistics than the one she mailed out on the 1st. And they are much higher and make my record appear even worse than she did on the 1st. I'm saying her figures are misleading and they're not all true. But most importantly, experience matters. And I have been working for over 27 years as both a private practice attorney and a district attorney to put victims first and to fight for justice. It is evident that I'm not a very good politician, and I'm not ashamed of that. In fact, I'm actually quite proud of it. It is the very same reason that I have been a good district attorney. I have spent my first 3 years in office working to bring criminals to justice and be an advocate for victims' rights. If I were a politician, I'd be compiling self-promoting statistics and other propaganda that does not serve the best interests of the public. The fact is, crime is down. And no amount of double-speak can change that fact. Combating crime is a community effort that requires dedication and cooperation with the police, the sheriff's departments, investigators, victims, and private citizens. I am proud of the role that I have played in this crime-fighting team. In 3 short years, I have secured 1,083 convictions and only 12 acquittals. I am standing for re-election on that record. You have a choice between a prosecutor with over 27 years of legal experience and a young and inexperienced politician. If re-elected, I pledge to continue to aggressively prosecute dangerous criminals who threaten our families. And I ask you for your vote.